Okay, November, day 18. And tonight's video is about a sensitive subject, and it's about the impact of betrayal trauma. Now, life can simply blow up for some families where there's been covert sexual addiction happening, and at the same time, sexual relational integrity disorder happening to conceal it. So generally what happens, and you'll see there, and I'm going to try and sort of expand the screen on these ones and pull me in and out, but generally life has exploded. There's been some sort of discovery trauma, and that can happen through finding an email, finding things that have been concealed up till now, and a real sense of betrayal will click in. That betrayal will not go away until there is a full disclosure. Now, generally, what happens here is we get a staggered disclosure, and the beginning of a secret life is revealed. So, what I want to talk about tonight is just what is that process. I've not met a guy yet that's told me anything other than I told her everything. But then the betrayal trauma triggers the limbic system, which we're going to go into, a limbic response that we are fighting for safety, and partners start to go crazy with the fact that this secret life has revealed itself. And essentially, it is like having underneath your house, and I'll expand this out so we can see it, this idea of Dr. Omar Minwali is that when there's sexual betrayal in a family system, there's this compartmentalization, like there's this secret toxic basement that sort of illicit, illegal, dangerous, or even evil material makes its way into a family home. So largely you're going to see within that system, for all intensive purposes, a happy home for everyone to see on the surface, but this secret toxic basement that's within. It'll be compartmentalized, which is a feature of addiction. There'll be gaslighting, which is the deliberate and systemic misleading of information over time. You will generally see at the beginning what they call either a staggered disclosure or a trickle truth, meaning people generally, to self-preserve out of fear, will generally only tell part truths in the moments of discovery. This can be incredibly difficult to heal from, because it's one thing to lie about the addiction, it's another thing to lie when we're pretending to be getting well. There'll be manipulation. Again, this will be the limbic system of the addict as they're trying to, again, they're trying to get safety. So they will manipulate, bully, stand over, withdraw. Essentially here we see people deflect, defend, or disappear. There's going to be there's illness now. There's the revealing now that there's a sex addiction untreated. And the other thing that people don't anticipate is largely there's a complex post-traumatic stress reactiveness that we call betrayal trauma that the partner doesn't deserve, didn't create, but now has to heal from it. And it all has to be done in a habitat where there's been incredible deception. The partner doesn't know what is real. And with the criteria feature of denial for the addict in an untreated illness, they don't know what is real. If you get Facing the Shadow, I was just looking up at it, there's right above my desk. If you get Facing the Shadow or Out of the Shadows by Patrick Carnes, the very first chapter in Facing the Shadow is self-delusion, trying to work out, what is real, and they use that Scott Peck quote that mental health is reality at all costs. So essentially, we've got sexual betrayal in a family system, difficult to treat, but it's what we need to do. And this is what sort of happens next and why it is so genuinely complex. When there is discovery and disclosure, what we've got here is two different sets of traumas happening. For the partner, there's a discovery trauma. All of a sudden, life forever has changed. And generally, discovery trauma can mean that we might get data that takes this right back to before we were dating. So the whole landscape moves. And what is this is colloquially called is betrayal trauma complex PTSD. Because like complex post-traumatic stress, there's a series of events now that sort of explodes into reality posthumously. It through discovery trauma, we realize the past and all of these things have not been real. This disclosure trauma, then, the addict generally comes up with some parts of the detail. I always think in layman's terms, it's like what we've been caught for plus 10%. And what it gets exposed here, it's one thing to deal with a sex addiction, but what Minwal is sort of highlighted is if you're in a partnered relationship and you've abused the family system, that largely we don't have to just own a sexual addiction. We need to own that there's this compulsively abusive sexual relationship disorder, that over time, to conceal this behavior, we have misled someone else to the point of psychiatric injury now. Now, this is a contentious subject, so I don't want to harp on it, and I don't want to mislead anybody. What we know about sex addiction, a bit like meth addiction, it's the two addictions that can certainly happen to addicts that have some evidence that there's no developmental trauma on their side. Now, up until betrayal trauma really got identified as the only way to treat sex addiction in a family system, with the trauma model, it moved away from the co-addict model. In saying that, there will be at some point for a partner, this might expose some untreated early attachment issues in their own life or early developmental traumas that were not identified up until this point. But we certainly, as Robert Weiss pointed out in Pro-Dependency, it is unethical to assume that a partner has any of that, and that's why they have got not to be assumed at all. But it could be the part of the process of discovery trauma is there might be some developmental trauma about sexual addiction in the family history. On the other side, you've got the addict. Now, the secret world's exploded and it's exposed this sex addiction. The other thing that they've got to come to terms with now is there is this deceptive, compartmentalized relational reality that's now there, that their partner is showing signs of complex stress. There's moodiness, sometimes violence. Some partners can appear the crazier one because the addict has been numbing out this whole time and is largely in denial. The partner now, their whole world is exploded and their brain is injured as a result due to the trauma impact. There can be a compulsive entitled sexuality. It might expose for the male that they actually think that this is something they should be allowed to do. And again, with most addictions, there is some distress from earlier life that this distress reduction behavior has been covering up. And this makes it particularly volatile because you could have two nervous systems now going into this limbic ping pong. You've got the sexual addiction and relational integrity disorder for the addict. You've now got the betrayal trauma. So the world for the partner is completely changed. That they can't trust the person in life they were meant to be able to trust, that's supposed to have their back, is now the source of incredible injury. For the addict, underneath the addiction could be developmental trauma untreated, and also not to be assumed, but underneath for the partner could be a double whammy of developmental trauma, meaning that within a traumatized brain on both parties, we could have this definite injury that happens. And you know, what we're talking about is that the mid part of the brain becomes the dominant part of the brain when it comes to engagement. So we'll either go into fight and flight or we go to shut down. Now, generally, an adult woman who's been betrayed is not necessarily going to go to a freeze or flight mode. They might run for safety, but generally we fight because we've got some evidence that we've been misled. And sometimes when a discovery happens, it doesn't just discover an addiction, it discovers all the lies we've been gaslit with. And that becomes, the dishonesty becomes as disruptive, sometimes more disruptive than the actual sexual betrayal. So what we have to do is create safety, and with a safer check-in. Now, I've done a video on that. Go back through the videos. I've done the safer check-in. So we got to create safety. The AVR formula is an acknowledge, validate, and respond formula from Carol Jurgensen Sheets. We got to find some partner support groups and counselling. Partners have been the cohort of injured people that just have been so under-resourced, but thank God now there's a lot of great resources for partners. Addict has to go into recovery and start a life of full accountability. There's no room now for entitlement. And a full disclosure process generally needs to now take place. So the next thing that happens is this idea that if you've been discovered for a sex addiction and you think, well, I'll stop acting out and everything should be fine, it's delusional. It's delusional. We have injured somebody now who didn't deserve it, who didn't create it, and the entitlement. If we don't deal with this entitlement disorder, then I've seen men do incredibly harmful things. They start to defend, deflect, disappear. They bully their partner. When are you going to get over this? I haven't done it for a month, 2 months, 6 months, a year. And if we can't see that our partners have been traumatized and we created it, then we are going to continue to create harm. And I would say it's going to be an unsafe environment for the betrayed partner. So the work that is available and the tools that are available, Help Her Heal by Carol Jurgensen Sheets, her trigger buster or relational CPR, is that we have to, as an addict, learn to identify the trigger. We've got to learn how to get clarification, accountability, and validate. We have to learn to orientate to the here and now and remind our partner that they're safe and that you are in active recovery. And the caveat through all of this information, if you are still acting out and pretending you're in recovery, then you are back in your relational integrity disorder, you're back in your entitlement, and you are now damaging not just your history in this relationship, but if you pretend that you're in recovery, then it's one thing to say you're a sex addict, but you've now destroyed your partner's view of recovery as well. The other element is we need de-escalation, safety, and stabilization, and that's where we use the AVR system. I'll go through that quickly in a second, but I do a whole video on that. And as part of this social engagement, as the partner starts to regulate, they will start to notice this somatic softening, and now we can converse, right? So this CPR is, in that moment, I've got to help them identify the trigger, got to help them get orientated back to the here and now because they've got a post-traumatic stress reactiveness. I've got to help de-escalate and create safety, and the AVR is great for that. And then I can now, we're back nervous system to nervous system regulated. We can now talk about what just happened. And this is why the AVR that we use as a tool, one of the mistakes guys go to is they go to the reassurance straight away. They think, I haven't acted out for a while. So they'll just say, I'm sober, I didn't do anything, that trigger that just happened didn't happen. But it didn't happen for you, but it happened for your partner. So where the AVR becomes critical in helping somebody regulate themselves is that we've got to acknowledge the issue first. We've got to practice the AVR, and that requires that we acknowledge the situation and the accompanying pain, and that pain was created by us. Without knowing us, this trigger doesn't exist. We validate the feelings using the 5 primary ones. I can see, as you discuss the issue, that you feel anger or sadness, loneliness, happiness, fear or shame. And then we can reassure. So the AVR is one of those tools that if it's not done right, it's worth not doing at all. Because if we just go to the R, we're not doing an AVR. We're basically trying to bully our partners that we're not acting out anymore. You should get over this. And if we do that, then we're just continuing the harm. We are continuing in a sexual relationship integrity disorder, because there is no integrity if I'm going to make your reaction about you when in actual fact it doesn't exist without my behavior in the past. So the trick here for addicts, and it's not a trick, it's the way to use this tool, is that when my partner's triggered, I need to have a clear understanding of the trauma model. They've gone to their midbrain, they've gone to this flipping their lid, and they're in their limbic system. They've gone to fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And it's my job to orientate them, to help them heal, because I've got access to my executive thinking, to use that hand model of the brain. And I can help and acknowledge that the pain they're in, the thing that's triggered, is being created by me. The feelings associated, therefore, are my responsibility, and that I can then reassure that I'm in recovery, and is there anything I can do to help you feel safe right now? And that's the way that we can help orientate our partners. The next piece is that there needs to be a full disclosure that happens moving forward. Now, initially, they usually wait 3 to 6 months so an addict can get into recovery, get the support they need. The partner gets into some partner support and counseling through betrayal trauma resources, group work, individual therapy. And once we get some stability and support in place, then we need to go through and do a full disclosure. Now, it discloses all integrity breaches, not just the sexual acting out, but all of the lies that go with it. The addict needs to answer all of the partner's questions, and it's critical that a partner works with a betrayal trauma specialist so they can really get down to the questions they need to ask and maybe become aware of the things they don't need to know. A partner impact statement will be read to the addict. And that impact statement is a real excavation of every hurt. And we usually, I know when I do this with Shailene Drayton and Andrea Murray as betrayal trauma specialists, we use the resource Courageous Love and the Dan Drake, Janice Cordial resources to really get to the bottom and help a partner get through all of the shame and pain and anger that they need to get out. From that letter, boundaries and bottom lines are established and need to be created. Now, once we've got full transparency and integrity, and the addict is in recovery and the betrayed partner is receiving support, then the partner can make a decision to stay or go, and the addict can, work with whatever is now in front of them, because we don't have any hand at the end of this. We really need the partner to get all the information they need so they can make a decision whether to stay or go. And then we move on to relational counseling for the couple. To now we've got safety and boundaries and bottom lines in place that we can start to work on being vulnerable again. And that's where the work of Alexandra Katahakis, Sheila Grigore for Christian couples, where we talk about erotic intelligence, or the great sex rescue, is where we start to then, once we've got safety, once we've got recovery, once we've got healing for the partner, is that we can then move towards that restoring, that vulnerability that we need to have intimate relationships. So I hope that for this work today, that this has been helpful in explaining a little bit about recovery and what happens and why it's so difficult. I can't, in working with addiction for over 30 years, I can't recommend more highly getting a trained either CSAT or betrayal APSAT trained therapist that have done the training to help with this. Disclosures done wrong create more harm. So look up, Patrick Carnes. There's a whole list of resources maybe I'll put into the chat that for betrayal partners, and look for a CSAT therapist if you're looking for a sex addiction therapist. So that's the end of today's video. Be gentle with your heart. I look forward to doing another video tomorrow night. Bye.